Good afternoon, I'm Don Miller.
And I'm Gwen Scott, sitting in for Bella Shaw. Coming up in just a minute on Newsday, after 10 years of apparent indifference, America's Vietnam veterans today took their place in history, afforded by a New York ticker-type parade.
The hero's welcome in New York was added to by the deeds of a group of vets returning earlier today from a memorial service in the city. Without waiting for an official thank you, the veterans left a burning Queens apartment building after rescuing 18 people from the blaze.
And we'll interview a professor who's lived in South Africa for 2 years for his thoughts on apartheid.
And we'll also talk with a representative of the group Defenders of Wildlife, who've just released a report card on how well the Reagan administration is protecting the country's wildlife.
Those stories and much more in just a minute, but first here's Flip Spiceland with a look at the nation's weather.
Thunderstorms are strengthening in the south. A severe thunderstorm watch has been posted now until 8 o'clock for parts of eastern Arkansas and southwestern Tennessee and for northern sections of Mississippi and Alabama. Those thunderstorms are along a frontal system that's moving to the south through Arkansas and northern Alabama. Golf ball-sized hail and some tree damage has been reported at Oxford, Mississippi early this afternoon. Thunderstorms are also scattered over Missouri, Illinois, western Kentucky, and the central Gulf of Mexico. Let's take a look now at the specific city forecast for cities around the nation for tomorrow. Boston will be sunny and go to 67. New York sunny and 69. 73 in Philadelphia. Sunny in Washington and 77. Atlanta partly cloudy, and Orlando up to 89. Birmingham thunderstorms tomorrow as the front moves through. Columbus sunny. Detroit sunny. Milwaukee sunny. St. Louis partly cloudy and 77. Kansas City sunny and up to 70. San Antonio 87. 79 in Denver. Great Falls will go to 75. Windy in Salt Lake City. Phoenix will be fair and climb to 97. San Diego partly cloudy and 72. Los Angeles 74 for a high tomorrow, cloudy in San Francisco. Portland 68, 67 in Spokane, Honolulu 85, and showers in Juneau and a high of 53 degrees. That's the latest look at the weather around the nation. I'll be back later with more.
The News Channel: London, Rome, Los Angeles, Vienna, Miami, Buffalo, Seoul, Tokyo, Moscow, Newark, Nicaragua, Iran, San Francisco, Peking, Paris, New York, Nashville, Naples, Warsaw, Jamaica, Washington. All this and more on the News Channel.
I'm Don Miller in Atlanta.
And I'm Gwen Scott, sitting in for Bella Shaw. Our top story this afternoon, thousands of Vietnam veterans crossed the Brooklyn Bridge today and marched down Broadway to a hero's welcome that many said was 10 years late in coming. As the numbers go, it was the biggest parade in New York's history, and it was one of the most emotional. Many spectators wiped tears from their eyes. Some estimate that 25,000 veterans and their families walked the historic Route of Heroes, but the parade was led by disabled veterans in wheelchairs, and one of those was pushed by Mayor Ed Koch, who established the commission that organized the parade a decade after the last U.S. soldier left Saigon. The parade today in the heart of New York was the climax of a two-day celebration. Last night, there was a dedication of a memorial to the Vietnam veterans and a fireworks display in Lower Manhattan. The memorial features letters to and from 83 servicemen telling of hopes and fears during that Vietnam War.
18 people in Long Island credit their lives today to 7 veterans returning home from last night's dedication ceremony. The group spotted a fire in a 3-story frame building. They roused the sleeping residents and helped them out of windows and down fire escapes. The rescuers are from the Vietnam Veterans Outreach Center in Queens. 6 firefighters were hurt fighting that blaze. Damage to the building was reported to be heavy.
A conservative newspaper, the Washington Times, is setting up a private fund to raise $14 million for rebels trying to overthrow Nicaragua's Marxist government. Editor-in-Chief Arnaud de Bourgrave says the money would buy food, clothing, and medical supplies for the rebels. He told CNN the response to the fundraising drive has been positive.
I have not had one negative phone call, not one negative letter, not one negative message of any kind, nothing but supportive calls. So doesn't this prove, at least to this observer, once again, that Congress is out of sync with the American people?
Some other newspaper editors and publishers are not happy that the Washington Times is setting up that rebel fund. The president of the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper, Sam McKeel, had this reaction.
I just think it's totally inappropriate for a newspaper to be involved in any such political activity, funding anything of that sort. Our job is to cover the news, to report it, to comment on it, serve our public, our country that way, and not any other way.
McKeel spoke in Miami, where he's attending a meeting of the American Newspaper Publishers Association. Another battle may be shaping up on Capitol Hill over aid to the Nicaraguan rebels. House Speaker Tip O'Neill says many lawmakers who voted against humanitarian aid for the rebels last week may be changing their positions. O'Neill says it's because some lawmakers were embarrassed over Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega's visit to Moscow. Oklahoma Democrat Dave McCurdy says he'll introduce a measure tomorrow to provide $14 million in humanitarian aid for the rebels, the same amount the House voted down.
Like many of my colleagues, I was frustrated by the lack of options which led to the defeat 2 weeks ago of a proposal to provide humanitarian aid to the resistance forces in Nicaragua. I believe recent events have shown that it was a mistake to completely reject such aid, and I think this House should take another look at that issue.
Congressman McCurdy also says the humanitarian aid would, quote, fill a dangerous hole in American foreign policy in Central America.
Bernie, Spain is not happy with the U.S. support of the rebels in Nicaragua. That point was made clear today in Madrid during a meeting between President Reagan and Spain's Socialist Prime Minister Felipe González. But both leaders do agree that their nations have cordial and friendly relations despite their differences. But at Madrid University, the mood was not exactly cordial as some 3,000 students called for the total withdrawal of U.S. troops from Spain and for Spain's withdrawal from NATO. Neither President Reagan nor Prime Minister González publicly addressed that issue of military personnel in Spain, but Spain's foreign minister today told reporters that the United States has agreed to preliminary talks on reducing the American military presence in Spain. The foreign minister made that announcement after a meeting with Secretary of State Schultz.
Lebanon's Christian leaders are calling for an end to sectarian fighting. It's quiet again in Beirut today, but last night a 15-hour battle across the city's Green Line left at least 23 people dead and 70 others wounded. It was the 9th straight day of fighting between Christian and Muslim militiamen. The overnight battle was the longest bout of shelling in more than a year.
A brain scan today on artificial heart patient William Schrader shows no further bleeding. The Louisville Humana Hospital announced those test results just a few minutes ago. Schrader, the longest surviving heart implant recipient, is in critical but stable condition today. Schrader had been living in an apartment near the hospital, but he was readmitted yesterday in critical condition with a brain hemorrhage. The hospital says Schrader's family was able to visit him several times today.
Today, during the retrial of Klaus von Bülow on attempted murder charges, the judge rejected a plea from von Bülow's lawyers for a mistrial. The defense lawyers argued unsuccessfully that the jury heard prejudicial testimony about an alleged struggle between von Bülow and his wife, Sunny. Von Bülow is accused of causing his wife to lapse into a coma in 1980. Superior Court Judge Corinne Grande ruled she would not be able to offset any possible prejudicial material through her statements to the jury. CNN is covering the von Bülow retrial live each day. Our coverage resumes tomorrow morning.
This may not seem like election season, but Republican strategists hoping to capitalize on the president's impressive victory last fall launched a campaign today to bolster the party's future. The Republicans say they will try to get 100,000 registered Democrats to switch to the GOP in the next 100 days. Republican National Committee Chairman Frank Fahrenkopf.
We believe that the Republican Party is correctly perceived today as the party of the future and the party of opportunity. The Democrats have become the party of old ideas, hand-wringing, and negativism. We offer prosperity and peace through strength. They offer gloom and doom.
Fahrenkopf said the target states for Operation Open Door will be Florida, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. Democratic National Chairman Paul Kirk quickly dismissed the Republican campaign as a, quote, transparent public relations blitz that won't work. Some members of the House Select Committee on Hunger want to provide more surplus grain to starving people of the world. The committee held a news conference today. CNN's John Holliman reports.
275 loaves of bread for every man, woman, and child in Africa. That's what could be delivered, the Hunger Caucus says, if all the wheat in government storage today were released and baked into loaves. Congressman Tony Hall of Ohio and Senator John Melcher of Montana are introducing a bill this week to force the Agriculture Department to ship the grain from expensive storage facilities to the world's hungry.
Our warehouses are bulging with plenty. This is at a time when there's a great number of people in Africa, almost to the tune of 150 million people, that are not only calorie deficient at a maximum, but are facing severe starvation.
This is what we pay out of the Treasury, $700 a minute, to pay all those storage costs on all the wheat and the milk and the cheese and everything else that we already own. Uncle Sam already owns.
The storage system was set up to protect farmers from low prices when they grow too much. But Agriculture Secretary John Block says the storehouses are already being emptied to feed the hungry as rapidly as possible.
If the suggestion is we need to provide more food, and if the need is there, we probably will, because we're not going to let people go hungry. We're going to be doing our share. In fact, the United States of America is providing about half of the food for Africa, and the rest of the world, the other half. That's kind of carrying your share of the load.
The Congressional Research Service says the cost of shipping and then processing these farm products into food could be as much as $3.4 billion. That is 10 times the cost of storing the products for a year. John Holliman, CNN at the Agriculture Department in Washington.
Also here in Washington, a foreign exchange and precious metals firm, Deek Pereira, remains closed today. The office was shut down yesterday when demonstrators entered to protest apartheid in South Africa. Deek Pereira deals in South African Krugerrands, among other items. Anti-apartheid activist Randall Robinson is one of the protesters who say they will stay in this office indefinitely. In a few minutes, Newsday will have an interview with an expert on what's going on in South Africa. He's Vincent Crapanzano, author of Waiting, The Whites of South Africa.
Los Angeles, Vienna, Miami.
I'm sure you recognize this lovely melody as Stranger in Paradise. But did you know that the original theme is from the Polybetsian Dance No. 2 by Borodin? So many of the melodies of well-known popular songs were actually written by the great masters, like these familiar themes. And now, all of the best-loved melodies from the classics have been gathered by Vista Marketing into a big 4-record collection. Yes, here are 120 of the greatest works of Strauss, Beethoven, Schubert, and many more, performed by Europe's finest musicians. It's a priceless introduction to the classics that will enrich every home. But there's a great deal more. You also get this special collection of piano masterpieces, 30 of the most beautiful melodies ever composed for the keyboard.
Yes, right now, you can get this magnificent collection of 150 of the world's greatest music masterpieces, all for only $19.95. And you have a choice of records, cassettes, or 8-track cartridges.
Yes, here's a unique opportunity to own a complete library of the world's most beautiful music. Here's how to order yours.
To order phone toll-free, 1-800-257-1257. To avoid COD charges, send check or money order for $19.95 for records or tapes to Classics, P.O. Box 8250, Atlanta, Georgia. That's Classics, P.O. Box 8250, Atlanta, Georgia. Visa and MasterCard accepted.
Now back to CNN, the world's most important network.
Despite protests from animal rights organizations, NASA officials say animal experiments will continue on future shuttle missions. About 50 people demonstrated against such experiments at the shuttle's landing site in California yesterday. 24 rats and 2 monkeys rode the Challenger on her last mission, which touched down yesterday. NASA Science Chief Burton Edelson said great care was taken to ensure the safety and comfort of the animals on board the shuttle. The 24 rats were killed and studied to find out what effect weightlessness has on the body's organs. Later on this broadcast, we'll have as our guest a member of the Defenders of Wildlife. John Fitzgerald is active in the Endangered Wildlife Program, and we'll talk with Mr. Fitzgerald about the Reagan administration's record on wildlife issues.
Okay, well, we know it's a lovely sunny day here in Atlanta, but Flip Spiceland, what about the rest of the country?
Not only is there a lot of rain stretched across South Gwen, but I'm afraid we're going to see some of it a little bit later. This frontal system responsible for it continues its southerly movement. Now the front just approaching northern Mississippi and northern Alabama. The rainfall amounts there are going to be rather heavy. Indeed, a severe thunderstorm watch has been issued for this area right in here. I'll give you more specifics on that in just a moment. Some places in northern Mississippi have already reported some tree damage due to the strong and gusty winds. In addition to that, there's been quite a bit of hail reported in this area. However, that all having been said, we suspect that the activity associated with the passing of this front will be relatively weak. Indeed, it is a severe thunderstorm watch, not a tornado watch, as we saw yesterday back here in Oklahoma, where there was one tornado reported touching down in the Oklahoma Panhandle. There was, again, what you would have to consider minimal damage associated with that tornado touching down in that area. The rainfall in here, not particularly heavy, although overnight there were some rather heavy thunderstorms that did produce as much as an inch of rainfall in some places in Oklahoma and Kansas. But we'll watch the southerly movement of this front for the remainder of the afternoon. Indeed, this is where severe weather could develop. You get away from the front, and the weather's really very, very nice. As Gwen pointed out, sunshine covers much of the southeast today. North of the frontal system, it's very nice and sunny, although temperatures overnight have been quite chilly. The air mass to the north of this front is really quite dry, so if we can ever get this front to push on through, most everyone is going to be enjoying just beautiful spring weather. Let's turn our attention to the west for a moment. A new system has moved in from the northwest, but it too appears to be rather weak. Only some widely scattered showers overnight associated with it. Let's take a look at the CNN color radar, see if there's anything out there now. Yeah, just a little bit up here in Idaho, back into the state of Oregon. You can see a shower that's breaking out here in the central Rockies. This may become a wider area of rainfall later this afternoon. Here you can see flashing on your screen the area that is under a severe thunderstorm watch until 8 o'clock tonight. If you live within that box, you're under a severe thunderstorm watch until 8 o'clock tonight. This is all basically light rain up in here, but if you look closely, you can see some of the thunder showers that have developed down here from Arkansas across Mississippi and into Alabama. A look now at our forecast weather map then for tomorrow morning indicates that the frontal system by tomorrow morning should almost be to the coast, just about to the Gulf Coast. The heaviest rainfall will remain right in this area. We do suspect that the possibility of severe thunderstorms will be rampant overnight along the Gulf Coast area with scattered showers surrounding that. But again, in behind it, very beautiful weather is expected throughout the Northeast, the Great Lakes area, the upper Midwest, much of the Plain States area, and through most of the West. That weak system that I mentioned that's moving inland will have very little even cloud cover associated with it tomorrow. I would suspect by tomorrow afternoon as this front hits the central Rockies that some shower activity will erupt. But tomorrow morning, not much along that frontal system. A new weather system is offshore, and that'll bring a little bit of shower activity into northern California tomorrow. And that's the latest look at the weather around the nation. I'll be back later in the program with more weather news for you, but now back to Bernard Shaw.
Thank you, Flip. With us now in our New York Bureau, Professor Vincent Crapanzano of the City University of New York. He is the author of a new book entitled Waiting, The Whites of South Africa. Professor Crapanzano is an anthropologist who lived in South Africa during a portion of 1980 and 1981. Professor, you went to a village which you call Windall near Cape Town, and you point out that the names of the people you actually spoke to have been changed to protect them, and that you interviewed mostly whites. Is that the general feeling in this town near Cape Town, that the world is forcing us, is rushing us?
Yes, I think it is, generally speaking. It's certainly truer among the Afrikaans speakers than among the English speakers, but I think most South Africans, not just in that village, but all over South Africa, I think most white South Africans feel that they're being pressured by the West to change rather more rapidly than they think they ought to.
In your book, as I say, it's entitled Waiting, The Whites of South Africa. You quote one Afrikaner, Henny, who says the Afrikaner is a traditionalist. He'll sacrifice a lot to keep things the way they were. Is that kind of sacrifice going on now? I ask that question because you also point out that upwards of 100 years ago, people were predicting that South Africa society would cave in.
Yes, people have been predicting that South Africa would cave in for a good long time. The whites are very entrenched there, and they're very, very strong position there. And I think they do feel that they have a long time still to go. So they are feeling more and more pressure than they have before. And they will, I think, and I think Henny is quite right in that position, I think they will make a lot of sacrifices in order to stay. The main sacrifice, I would say, are sacrifices to their own morality. That in many ways, many of them are willing in certain ways to forego the very moral tenets that they themselves hold in order to stay there.
Why do you think the world has such difficulty putting itself in the shoes of the Afrikaner? These are people whose backs, as they view it, are to the wall. They have nowhere else to go. Why do you think the world has difficulty understanding their policies and their attitudes towards blacks and coloreds?
Well, I think the world has difficulty. I think everyone has difficulty, even to a certain extent, as paradoxically as it may sound, the Afrikaners themselves, to the degradation and the systematic degradation of such a large number of human beings. I think what is most frightening is the systematization of it all. I mean, there's racism all over, but this absolutely extraordinary constructed society based upon on the inequality and ultimate degradation of its majority population, I think the world finds horrendous.
Did you have any difficulty doing these interviews?
Not really. No, I think most white South Africans, and I must say that I did talk primarily to white South Africans. That was the project that I had set myself. It was also the permission I had been given. And quite frankly, in South Africa, it is to do the kind of lengthy interviews, you know, over weeks and weeks that I would have had to do, would have endangered the lives of many of the black people.
Tell us a little bit about your conversation with someone you refer to as the most bigoted man in the valley, 83 years old.
Yes. Right. Yeah, he was certainly probably the most bigoted man I had ever met. He was a man who in Afrikaans is called a verkrampte, a very, very, very conservative human being. And he was the type of person who really felt that the world, that the blacks were an inferior people. When they had first, he claimed that when he first came to, that when the white man first came to South Africa, the blacks were not wearing clothes, that there had been some sign of evolution, as he put it, that, 300 years had gone by, now they were wearing Western clothes.
Now,
he saw this as progress.
He was the man who criticized President Carter, and he offered to pay for the assassination of then Kurt Waldheim, who was Secretary General of the United Nations. But he also asked you, apparently in that interview, when will you, meaning an American in the United States, have a black president? What could you say to that?
I said I hoped it would be soon. What I did insist was that the possibility is there legally. There are obviously very major constraints, as we all know, but they are not legal constraints in the way that apartheid operates. I think the main difference between, say, what the racism that we find in the United States and the racism that we find in South Africa is that in South Africa it is absolutely and completely legislated.
We only have a few seconds left, and I'd like to ask you, what do you hope your book will accomplish?
Well, I hope the book will make people realize something of the complexity of the issues there, to recognize for them to see that it is not a very, very simple situation, and that, but it requires a great deal of subtlety of thought and a great deal of subtlety of pressure to bring about the kind of change that I think I and all Americans and most people in the world would like to see happen.
Vincent Crapanzano, the author of a new book entitled Waiting, The Whites of South Africa. Thanks for being with us this afternoon, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Newsday continues in a moment.
This is CNN, the world's most important network.
Are you ready for the major tax revisions in '85? Changes that can dramatically affect your pocketbook, your lifestyle, your future? Take action now and profit by preparing for those big tax changes. Now more than ever, you need the Kiplinger Washington letter to move ahead and profit. Kiplinger editors have dug deep for inside, not yet released information from the highest levels in Washington, and they're revealing their important and surprising findings in current issues of the Kiplinger Washington letter. What's more, they're offering readers insightful predictions on interest rates and inflation with unhedged forecasts. Kiplinger editors talk to leaders of business, banking, retailing, and government. They ask the questions you want answers to. Nobody has the time personally to read and digest all the material necessary to cope with today's complex, ever-changing scene. That's why you should stay with the smart people, the decision makers, who count on the Kiplinger Washington letter. Today more than ever, you need this letter to move ahead and profit. That's why you should try this introductory offer to the Kiplinger letter for 6 months, 26 weekly issues for only $15, and get free a special Kiplinger report on the top opportunities, the most pay, the best lifestyle for the rest of the 80s. It's yours free when you try the Washington letter for 6 months, 26 weekly issues. And that's not all. When you phone today, you'll also get another Kiplinger analytical report on what to look for in the next few years, right through to the year 2000. A forecast on how you can profit most, which kinds of business will do best, where to find the highest returns with the lowest risk, money market funds, stocks, bonds. A checklist of things you should look for. Sound, down-to-earth judgment and advice. Smart people, decision makers, count on the Kipling or Washington letter. They say they can't do without it, so don't miss out. Call 1-800-453-7000. If you don't make or save many times the $15, you keep these two valuable reports on the best careers for the rest of the 80s and how you can profit from now to the year 2000. We'll refund the unused portion of your subscription. Isn't that fair enough? This could be the wisest investment you'll ever make, so take advantage today. Call 1-800-453-7000.
Now back to CNN, the world's most important network.
For the first time, violence on the president's trip abroad. This just in, violent clashes between police and protesters erupted near the U.S. Embassy in Madrid as President Reagan was winding down a two-day visit to Spain today. Officials say at least 6 people, including 3 policemen, were injured as riot police clashed with about 3,000 protesters. The protesters hurled bricks, bottles, and stones and burned 4 American flags on the city's main boulevard. Police charged into the crowd with truncheons swinging. At least 6 people were arrested.
The siege of Leningrad in World War II was a brutal and costly time for the Soviet people. But even during the worst of times, the city's leaders never forgot that survival alone was not enough. CNN's Stuart Loory has this report.
These treasures make up one of the great collections of cultural history in the whole world. When you use the word priceless, this is what you're talking about. A Leonardo da Vinci, a Rembrandt, a Rubens, a Renoir. These are just some of the treasures of the Hermitage Museum in Leningrad. They were all saved from destruction during World War II. Somewhere between 600,000 and 1 million people died in Leningrad during the war, most of them from starvation. In January 1942 alone, Leningraders were dying at the rate of more than 3,000 people a day.
Ну вот утром выходишь, а тут, значит, 7, 8, 12 или больше.
In the morning, you could see 7, 8, 12 or more corpses at the entrance. I was so weak, there were mornings I could not step over them. We had to use a small rear door when there were so many bodies at the front door.
But all the time people were dying, work went on at the Hermitage. Curators packed up and shipped out 1.2 million exhibits. They went to safety in the Ural Mountains, beyond the reach of the Nazis. Lesser treasures were stored away in the basements of the sprawling buildings. Boris Petrovsky is the director of the museum today. He survived the siege, and he has since made his career in the Hermitage. He was among 2,000 scholars and their families who lived in the basements during the siege.
The main thing is that everything had been prepared beforehand. Hitler gave us time. He didn't give it to France or other countries, but we had time. One unbreakable rule during the blockade was not to ever mention food, to shave, and to wash in order to look decent.
By war's end, in 1945, the Great Museum was being spiffed up for a reopening. 2 bombs and more than 30 artillery shells had hit the buildings, but only a few of the Tsarist carriages and 1 statue were destroyed. Workers swept and cleaned, galleries and ornate halls were renovated. The empty picture frames were refilled with treasures, and the gallery opening came on November 4th, 1945. Today, as the crowds course through the galleries, there's not one indication left of the hardships the Hermitage or its staff endured. This city's treatment of the Hermitage during World War II is the story of the nobility of the human spirit. Frankly, it's mind-boggling to learn that even while man is starving, when he has no bread himself, he knows that future generations cannot live by bread alone. Stuart Loory, CNN, Leningrad.
Coming up, a financial update from New York, and then sports with Debi Segura.
And we'll show you flamenco with the First Lady. We've got better reviews for being a good sport than for her dancing ability, however. This is Reagan on center stage, and much more when Newsday continues.
The most unforgettable sight you'll see in Florida this summer is the look on your child's face.
Give them the sunshine and sea breeze, new friends and fantasies of Florida. Florida, come I could hear you needed back.
Portland tries to stay alive when they battle Los Angeles, the semifinals of America's Super Shootout. Live at 10:30 p.m. Eastern on Superstation WTBS tonight. Stay on top of the hour's latest business developments with CNN's financial updates. From CNN's business headquarters in New York and the floor of the American Stock Exchange, hear what's making financial news every hour of the business day. Stay tuned for the next financial update at 30 minutes past the hour on CNN.
This is CNN, the world's most important network.
He's only the 13th person to receive such an honor. See the celebration as Gene Kelly accepts a Lifetime Achievement Award. Plus, focus on actors turned directors on Showbiz Today at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Then invest your interest in CNN Nightly Financial News. Examine all the day's trading on Wall Street and make sense out of the latest financial trends. Put your business into perspective on Moneyline at 7 p.m. Eastern. Experience life on CNN.
CNN tells it right. Your window on the world both day and night.
Every week you see more live coverage on CNN than on the other three networks combined. Mob confessions, second trials, big moves and faraway friends, physical fitness, and a day at the circus. CNN's live coverage lets you make up your own mind about what you see and hear.
Experience live on CNN.
At 29 minutes after the hour, we have time now for the latest financial news, and for that we go to Todd Benjamin in New York.
Good afternoon. A winning day on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average had been up as much as 10 points at one time, but nevertheless it did close up. It closed up some 5 points, and that is good news in what has been a rather lackluster market. Looking at the final numbers, the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed at 1252.76. Volume fairly heavy, 150,000 shares traded. Advancing issues were ahead of declining issues by a 9-6 margin. Over on the American Stock Exchange, that index was up about a quarter point, standing at 226.04. Volume 6,986,000 shares traded. The NASDAQ over-the-counter market rallying up a point to 280.86. Gold, and this is a spot price, having a very big day, up $6 at $314.90 an ounce. And silver gained 21 cents to close at $6.32 on the COMEX. In today's headlines, Chevron today saying it plans to reduce its debt by $5 billion over the next 4 years by selling off some of its assets. The chairman of the oil company saying those assets may include its 60% interest in Gulf Canada. Carl Icahn today confirming he is backing off his $18 a share takeover bid for Uniroyal. Uniroyal yesterday agreeing to a $22 a share or $836 billion leveraged buyout. Icahn will receive $6 million in expenses plus several million more if he tenders his shares. And Turner Broadcasting today reporting a loss of 3 cents a share for the first quarter, or $741,000. TBS says that's less of a loss than expected, and it represents an improvement of 86% over last year's first quarter loss of 26 cents a share. For all of last year, however, TBS made a $10 million profit. Turner Broadcasting today closing at 19, unchanged. Chase Manhattan said today it plans to buy 4 more state-insured savings banks in Ohio. The bank said, however, it will only acquire the institution if it is allowed to operate them as commercial banks. That would take action by the Ohio State Legislature, permitting Chase to close a commercial banking license, or rather to hold a commercial banking license in the state. Last month, Chase purchased 2 state-insured savings banks in Ohio, but said it would continue to operate them as savings institutions. In 1 hour, we'll have the futures report and the results of the first stage of the Treasury's record refunding this week, the auction today of $8 billion worth of 3-year notes. I'm Todd Benjamin at the Financial Desk in New York. It's back to Atlanta now.
The hectic schedule of her husband's European tour is keeping First Lady Nancy Reagan on her toes. Today she danced the flamenco at Madrid's Royal Theater after a performance by the School of Dramatic Arts and Dance. Mrs. Reagan tapped her heels with a group of young students. Afterwards, she was asked if she had a future as a flamenco dancer. Mrs. Reagan said it's something you have to start very young. But her escort, Queen Sofia of Spain, said the First Lady had a lot of rhythm, and the audience seemed to agree. Well, it looks like instant money won out over tradition. Debi Segura is in New York to tell us more about that and the Triple Crown. Debi?
Don, you're right. It's official. Spend a Buck will run for big bucks rather than a shot at the Triple Crown. The Colts handlers notified the Pimlico Racetrack today of their decision to skip the Preakness Stakes. Spend a Buck was shipped to Garden State Park yesterday, where he stands to win $2.6 million with a victory in the Jersey Derby on May 27th. Now, the track is owned by Robert Brennan, who was also interested in buying 50% interest in the Kentucky Derby champ. Brennan offered top dollar to compete with the Preakness Stakes and won. Spend a Buck's defection from the second leg of the Triple Crown is a slap in the face to establishment breeders who always ran for tradition rather than money. Experts feel today's decision just may spell the end of the Triple Crown as we know it today. Meanwhile, there's a great race underway in the National League West where 4 teams are separated by a game and a half. San Diego lost the top spot to Los Angeles last night, but only by a half game. Padres just may reclaim it today after killing the Cards. San Diego scored 5 runs in the first inning. Steve Garvey went 4 for 4 at the plate as San Diego routed St. Louis 12-2. Meanwhile, Chicago leads Los Angeles 3-2 in the bottom of the 6th inning, while San Francisco beat Pittsburgh this afternoon 5-3. Now, prior to the game, San Francisco announced it had traded shortstop Johnny LeMaster to Cleveland for pitcher Mike Jeffcoat and a minor leaguer. Well, last year, Detroit Tiger fans were noted for their wave. This season, there's a different movement in the stands, one that threatens the family atmosphere at Tiger Stadium. CNN's Robert Vito has details from Detroit.
The trouble began in the center field bleachers of Tiger Stadium, where rowdyism among some fans is nothing new. Over the years, bleacher bums, or bleacher creatures as they've been called, have thrown beach balls, cherry bombs, garbage, and bottles onto the field. They've even jumped onto the field only to be wrestled to the ground and arrested. Last week, the vulgarity and outrageous behavior became uncontrollable as thousands of patrons in the bleachers ignored public address system pleas that asked in the name of common decency to stop chanting obscenities. Obscenities heard not only in the ballpark, but picked up unbleeped by television and radio microphones. As far as Jim Campbell, president of the Tigers, was concerned, it was the bleacher bum's last stand, and he ordered the 11,000-plus bleacher seats closed indefinitely.
At least we're going to try and convince those people that come out here and misbehave that we're not going to put up with it. And if they never come back to a ball game, it won't bother me.
A few blocks from Tiger Stadium is the Lindell AC, a restaurant bar frequented by sport enthusiasts, including self-proclaimed bleacher bums such as Maureen Lefevre, who said Campbell's decision bummed her out.
Right
you
now.
feel that you're being picked on?
Yeah, I do. I really do.
And you're not one of those who
For 13 years we've been in those bleachers, man, you know, and why all of a sudden is it a big deal?
But most Tiger fans CNN talked with said they supported Campbell's decision.
Myself, I'm glad it happened. I mean, you know, between the throwing beach balls and the foul language, you know, it's about time that somebody did something, and they did.
It is offensive, and it's very surprising to think of adults in the bleachers with their kids alongside of them would chant something like that.
So when the Tigers took on the White Sox last weekend, the bleachers were no man's land. And with 11,200 empty seats, this usher, for once, enjoyed a quiet night at the old ballpark. The bleacher creatures were gone, and no one seemed to miss them. Robert Vito's CNN, Detroit.
NBA playoffs resume tonight. Denver and Los Angeles can clinch berths in the conference finals with victories at home. The Lakers host the Portland Trailblazers in the Forum, where they've won their last 21 home games. Meanwhile, the Nuggets entertain the Utah Jazz without starting point guard Lafayette Fever. He underwent arthroscopic knee surgery last night, and he'll be lost to the team for 10 days. Just 4 teams are left in the NHL playoffs. Defending Stanley Cup champion Edmonton has a 1-game lead over Chicago in the best-of-7 series, while Quebec leads Philadelphia by a game. Both of tonight's games take place in Canada. And that is Sports to the Moment. I'm Debi Segura in New York. Newsday will continue in just one moment.
Going out to dinner tonight? Before leaving the office, close the office door and take a fitness break. Yesterday we did wide squats for the thigh muscles. Today we're doing bent over flies for the arms, shoulders, and upper back. Stand with legs double shoulder width apart and bend from the waist, keeping your legs straight. Elbows should be flexed outward and wrists should be crossed. While keeping your elbows bent, lift the arms upward to shoulder level, then return to the starting position. This exercise, better known as bent over flies, benefits the arms, chest, shoulders, and upper back. Most office workers do experience shoulder, neck, and upper back stiffness from long periods of sitting. As a matter of fact, back pains afflict